The top business stories live from the Sky News City studio. Shares of BP fall after the shock resignation of Chief Executive Bernard Looney following allegations of relationships with colleagues. The UK economy contracts by more than expected, with early figures suggesting strikes and bad weather are partly to blame. And GoPro invests heavily in new products, despite recently reporting a 4% decline in revenues. I'll be speaking to its founder and chief executive later in the programme. Good morning. This is Business Live with me, Ian King. Shares of BP fell by as much as 1.75% this morning following the shock resignation last night of its chief executive, Bernard Looney. Mr. Looney, a BP lifer who became chief executive in February 2020, stepped down after admitting he did not give the complete story to the board during an investigation into historic relationships with colleagues. His departure raises questions about whether BP will continue with Mr. Looney's strategy, which had sought to make BP a carbon-neutral business by the middle of the century. Well, joining me now is Nick Butler. He's a former head of strategy at BP and he's visiting professor at King's College London. Nick, very good to see you this morning. Enormous shock, this. I guess the question is whether Mr. Looney's successor will continue with his strategy.
That is exactly the question, and I think the board are now concentrating on who the replacement should be. And I think the BP is a company that is very much led by the CEO, and who they appoint will determine just how far BP go with the green agenda. They've been trying to balance the two between oil and gas, which we still need, and renewables. And I think this is a key moment for the company.
It really is, isn't it? I mean, Mr. Looney had completely overhauled BP's management. He'd packed the executive committee with people that he'd hired, many of them from outside. Is there danger that some of them will leave now he's gone?
That is always a risk. When a CEO goes, you find that the people who've been very close to him can find other lives as well. I think the team is pretty good. I think the basic business is very good. There's no reason why the share price should come down. The business is carrying on and the oil price worldwide is quite high. Energy demand is growing right around the world, 10,000 new citizens every hour. Globally, so energy is needed. And the question is just what the balance of the company is going to be going forward. And absolutely. Bernard tried to make a fairly rapid move to the green agenda. He partially succeeded. And how far the BP board wants to go in pursuing that line will be determined by who they choose.
It feels, Nick, as though this could be quite a decisive break with the past for BP, given that Mr. Looney was the last of the so-called turtles whose careers were nurtured by John Brown. 3 of them went on to be CEO, but there are no more. He was the last one.
Well, there are 1 or 2 people who I think might be in the frame who did work for BP. There's the man who's now running Rolls-Royce, who ran the BP downstream business. And I think he would be a serious candidate. And David Peaty, who ran the business in Russia and lots of other places, and now running the nuclear authority in the UK. I think those sort of people will and should be considered.
A name that I wondered whether might be in the frame, Nick, is Charles Woodburn, who's obviously done a terrific job at BAE Systems, and he is an ex-oil and gas industry man.
Yes, he's another serious candidate, and it is a great job. It's not an easy job, but this is a worldwide business in a very important industry at a moment of real transition from the old to the new. It needs somebody good. The rewards are quite good, and it's just a fascinating job, having worked alongside people doing it in the past. I'd recommend it to anybody. You need quite strong nerves. And a great view of the world, but you won't be bored.
Is it fair to say that Bernard Looney had not carried all shareholders with him? I mean, you mentioned there the speed with which he was trying to move towards an energy transition. It's fair to say a lot of investors weren't necessarily on board with the pace that he was looking for.
No, I think the challenge is for shareholders to understand what the company is doing, what the real strategy is. I think it's very hard to match the returns that you can get from oil and gas with the returns from low-carbon business. I've always advocated that there's a case for separating the two. They run to a different agenda. They're different parts of the energy market. Low carbon is almost all about electricity. Oil and gas, much different. And I think having two separate businesses would have exposed more value, and the shareholders would have been happier.
How do you think history is going to judge Bernard Looney? I mean, he had 3 years in the job. He accomplished an awful lot in that time.
Yeah, that's right. He really changed the company, as you said earlier. He brought in a lot of new people, more diverse, more international than it has been in the past. I don't know anything about the allegations that have been made against him. If serious things come out, that will shape his reputation. I feel very sorry for him because I worked alongside him for several years. But we don't know what those allegations are, so we can't judge that yet. I think in terms of the business, he started to change it very much in a green direction. He probably didn't manage to get as far as he would like to have got, but I think he will be seen, along with John Brown, as one of the people who really started to change the oil and gas sector.
And Nick, before you go, just briefly, if you would please, give viewers a sort of flavour of what Bernard Looney is like as a man, having worked with him for so long.
He has Irish charm. I think he probably kissed the Blarney Stone at a pretty early age. He can charm anybody, and I think that's not a dishonest skill. It's very natural. It's not put on. I think he knows the business inside out. He's worked for BP. He had worked for BP since he was, I think, 21, and done a lot of jobs around the world. I always got on very well with him. He was fun to work with, and I hope he comes through this and that the allegations aren't too serious. I would expect, as I sent a message to him today, saying there is life after BP.
Well, I hope he appreciated that. Nick, as do we for you talking to us today. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Some other business news stories for you now. And the FTSE 100 insurance giant Aviva raised £800 million today with the sale of its 25.9% stake in Singapore Life Holdings and two related debt instruments. The buyer is the Japanese insurance giant Sumitomo Life Insurance Company, which already has a 23.2% stake in Singapore Life. The disposal is the latest in a series of sales by Aviva as it focuses on its insurance, wealth and retirement businesses in the United Kingdom, Ireland and Canada. Aviva shares currently ahead by some 2%. Redrow became the latest house builder this morning to warn that its profits this financial year will be down on last year. Redrow reported a pre-tax profit of £395 million for the year to the 2nd of July. That was up 61% on the previous 12 months. But it said profits in the financial year just started could be less than half that. Matthew Pratt, the chief executive, said the impact of a record number of consecutive interest rate rises in a short space of time and the general rise in the cost of living continues to make this a challenging housing market. And the wealth management giant St James's Place today named the former head of the life and savings giant Prudential as its new chief executive. Confirming a story first broken by Sky's Mark Glyman, St James's Place said Mark Fitzpatrick will succeed Andrew Croft at the beginning of December. The appointment comes at a critical time for St James's Place, whose fees and charges have come under intense scrutiny, as has the performance of some of its funds. Now, the UK economy contracted by more than expected at the start of the summer, with strike action and bad weather partly to blame. The Office for National Statistics says UK GDP contracted by 0.5% in July. That was worse than the expected 0.2% contraction. Well, the chief executive of Saxo UK, Charlie White-Thompson, joins me now. Charlie, great to see you this morning. Is it down solely to the weather and strikes, or are there intrinsic weaknesses in the economy there as well?
I mean, there are intrinsic weaknesses in the economy. I think this is a disappointing set of figures. It will take the gloss off the June numbers. And if we drill into the detail, because the devil is always in the detail, that if you look at month-on-month GDP growth was minus 0.5 versus a survey of 0.5, and the 3-month was 0.2 versus survey 0.3, therein is the detail. And the detail is that the engine room or the economy is flatlining or stuttering, whichever one you would choose to, whichever analogy you would choose to use. And this has consequences. And the consequences are that the economy needs to generate more revenue because at the moment we use debt and we use taxes as many of our leverages in order to fund our responsibilities. And if you think that tax, we are one of the highest tax burdens out there, and if you think that our debt is £2.6 trillion, and the interest on that debt is £110 billion a year, which is 2.5 times our defence spend, these are very big numbers. And that is why I have been so vocal about a growth plan which is progressive in order to kickstart and generate the revenue, which is the key to our success.
Well, we get an autumn statement in a couple of months' time from Jeremy Hunt. I mean, it sounds like it's just going to be a sort of fairly dour fiscal readout of spending plans. Do you expect more than that? Should there be more than that?
Yes, I mean, there should be more than that. And, you know, I would reach out to your millions of viewers and ask them to help drive this debate. We need a growth plan because high tax, high debt is not sustainable. And for me, it's absolutely key that we have this growth plan because otherwise we are in a financial straitjacket.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what are the implications of these figures today for the Monetary Policy Committee, which obviously meets later this month?
Yes, I should declare where I sit on this. So I am more with Mann than with Dhingra. So, you know, I believe that inflation is public enemy number one. And so, therefore, my view is that rates will be raised by 25 basis points on the 21st of September to 5.5%. And I think for your viewers, they should prepare and plan for that. But we have the inflation numbers which are out the day before. And I have a sneaking worry that inflation will be stronger than we think because oil has moved a lot and wheat prices have been upset by the war that we have in Ukraine. So my bet is 25 basis points, but it's 50-50.
You referenced Catherine Mann just now. She's obviously the uber hawk on the Monetary Policy Committee. Earlier this week, she said there was a greater risk to pausing interest rate rises than over-tightening. But, I mean, that does raise the risk of a recession, doesn't it?
Recession, if you look at these numbers, I mean, a recession is 2 quarters of negative GDP growth. For me, this is way too academic. There is a consumer recession. There is a consumer recession that is already out there. And when you have 2-year mortgage rates at 6.5%, the consumer is strained. So for me, it's about balance. It's about putting the policy through so that we bring inflation down without breaking the economy, and that's a difficult ask.
All right, Charlie, we could leave it there. Good to see you this morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bit of breaking news to bring you that's just reached us. A 60-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of possessing a dog dangerously out of control after an 11-year-old girl was injured by an American Bully XL and Staffordshire Bull Terrier crossbreed in Birmingham. That's according to West Midlands Police. Obviously, you'll have seen the horrific footage earlier in the week on Sky News of that dog attacking that poor girl. I'm going to tell you about the markets now. And sterling traded slightly to the downside following the weaker than expected GDP data this morning. I think we can show you what the pound is doing right now. It's off just under 1/5% lower against both the US dollar and the euro. The euro, by the way, off a similar amount against the greenback itself. On the equity markets, last night's sell-off on Wall Street were followed by declines overnight in most of the Asia-Pacific region. Only India and Singapore finished in positive territory. Well, in Europe, stocks are trading firmly to the downside this morning, all of them around 1% or so lower. Just now, talking points in Europe this morning. If you look at the bottom left-hand side of the screen there, you can see the IBEX in Madrid. That's the biggest fall in continental Europe, and I suspect that is because one of its biggest constituents has come off today. That's the fashion retailer Inditex, world's biggest fashion retailer, owner of Zara, of course, currently off 3 3/4% in Madrid on what appears to be profit-taking, despite the fact that it reported a 40% 40% rise in its half-year earnings today. Well, here in London, the FTSE 100 is also in negative territory, off by just over 1/3 of 1% in a broad-based sell-off. Ocado, the leading blue-chip faller in percentage terms, off 3.5% there. There are some gainers to mention, and one of them is Aviva, on that disposal, currently ahead nearly 2.5% now. All of the house builders are trading higher too. That might surprise you, given the news from Redrow. I don't know why we're looking at Johnson Matthey there. The Redrow numbers were not as bad as feared. That's up some 5% right now. In the FTSE, that means that Persimmon and Taylor Wimpey are both between 2 and 3% higher. Outside the FTSE, as I say, Redrow is one of the leading gainers. Another one is the travel operator On the Beach. The share's up there some 15.5% on news that full-year profits are going to be at the top end of expectations. Meanwhile, the oil price continues to scale new 10-month highs. Amid continued concerns over tightness in supply, barrel of Brent crude earlier hit $92.84. That was the highest since the 17th of November last year. It's currently changing hands at $92.59 a barrel, up just over 0.5%. Well, joining me this morning is Victoria Scholar, Head of Investment at Interactive Investor. Victoria, good to see you. Inditex is quite an eyebrow raiser, isn't it? I mean, on the whole, what looked to be a very, very good set of numbers, but the share price has come off.
Yeah, absolutely. It's already had a pretty good run so far this year. It's been outperforming rivals like H&M, and it did report pretty strong results, a 40% increase, like you say, in first half profits. But there was this warning about a negative currency impact of -3.5%, which was bigger than analysts had penciled in. So although Inditex has been performing well, it's enjoyed strong sales, it's been trimming down its store estate and still managing to generate revenues, and it's also been raising prices, which hasn't seemed to have dented consumer appetite as of yet. There are concerns about the stronger euro, and there are worries about how rising interest rates and a softening consumer could potentially dampen its outlook ahead. So while it's had this big run up so far this year, the question is whether or not it is actually sustainable, or whether we might see some weakness come through in the final months of the year.
Victoria, what about Redrow? I mean, it didn't sound terribly good on the face of it, but the stock price is up 5%, and so is the rest of the sector.
Yeah, absolutely. Some surprising share price moves today. I think it's because it reported underlying profits that actually outpaced analyst expectations. And the chairman said that the market had recovered in the spring of this year. So I think there's no denying the fact that the house builders are in a difficult situation at the moment, with rising interest rates, cooling house prices and softening demand. But I think the fact that Redrow managed to outpace those lowered expectations and that commentary about the spring season, combined with the fact that we do have an ongoing shortage of supply of housing here in the UK, all of that factors into a slightly better outlook for Redrow, and it stands somewhere in the middle in terms of the performance this year in the sector. We've seen some real outperformers like Taylor Wimpey and Vistry, which surged earlier in the week. And then on the other side, we've got Persimmon, which has been a real laggard because of its heavy exposure to the first-time buyer market, which of course is more sensitive to those changes in mortgage rates.
Briefly, if you would please, Victoria, obviously the big event in markets later today is the US inflation number. What are you looking out for?
Well, I think the real focus here is going to be the core inflation figure, because while we have seen headline inflation come down, we want to know whether it's actually still coming down when we strip out those more volatile elements. So it does look as though we're looking at a number of around 4.3%. So still some way to go to get back to target. And I think that's been the emphasis of the Federal Reserve lately, that while inflation has been moving in the right direction, we're not quite there yet.
All right, Victoria, got to leave it there. Good to see you this morning. Thank you. Still to come here on Business Live, GoPro invests heavily in new products despite recently reporting a small drop in revenues. I'll be speaking next to its founder and CEO. Don't go away.
Well, my background is journalism. That's what I did at first. And then, I guess about 10 years ago, I was offered a job as a communications consultant working with counterterrorism. It was just one of those things that happens. I used to be a crime reporter. Somebody knew I used to be a crime reporter. And they just thought I'd be able to handle the stress of dealing with something so tricky. And I ended up spending 5 years there, just not being a spy, but just meeting them, learning what they're up against and trying to convince them to communicate to the public what they're doing. And the last part I never succeeded in, ever, which is why I know they're not going to talk about this. They're never going to tell us the truth about what's happening. We never get to know the truth. And that's why I'm fascinated by it, because all we can do is sort of guess about what's really happening. They don't really recruit per se. In fact, I knew quite a few people who wanted to be spies, mostly women, in fact, and it's one of the things that fascinates me and why I write.
Is that just because of James Bond?
I think, actually, it's almost the opposite. I think people are drawn to this world of secrecy. It's danger and excitement. You know it would never be dull. And also patriotism. Like, these are the things that I think bring people in. But it's not easy to do. These days, you have to kind of go to them, and you have to apply to them. And it's very tricky. Like, lots of people apply, very few are accepted. I could never do it. And I was fascinated by the spies I met, by the deception, by the need to lie fluidly, to be comfortable living a life that is not your own, to lie even to those you love the most. That part I simply could not do. And I find it fascinating, this personality type that would be drawn to that. And I knew people who were good people who just saw this as an attraction rather than something that I see it as a really, that would be just so difficult.
Like Emirates, it's like better. Fly Emirates, fly better. Thank you.
Welcome back. Now, these are challenging times for consumer-facing businesses as inflation eats into disposable incomes around the world. And one company that's not been immune to that is GoPro, the maker of cameras and mountable and wearable accessories. It recently reported a 4% decline in revenues to $241 million for the 3 months to the end of June. But the company is still investing heavily in new products, most recently the new Hero 12 Black camera, which was launched last week. Well, joining me now, I'm pleased to say, is Nick Woodman. He's the founder and CEO of GoPro. Nick, welcome to you. You've just launched a new camera. How important are these product launches? Do you feel a constant need to sort of refresh the range?
Oh, absolutely. In our market especially, our customers expect annual refresh of our products, new products, and we get a big marketing boon from all the media coverage that we get every year. So new product announcements are very important to our business.
So who are you targeting with this particular line?
Well, the Hero 12 Black takes our best-selling flagship Hero camera and tailors it a bit more for professionals. It's still very easy to use for casual consumers. But as we were speaking just before the show, your own crew uses GoPros regularly. So we have to continue to advance our camera's performance to meet the needs of professionals as well. And Hero 12 Black just takes the Hero camera line up to that next level of performance.
Now, one of the big things that you've been doing with the business in recent years is turning part of it over to subscriptions. How important is that for your revenue base?
Subscription is extremely important to us from a profitability standpoint. It's a very high margin business for us. It's the fastest growing area of our business. We're going to finish Q3 with approximately 2.5 million subscribers, which is quite significant for us. It's in the range of 100 million of high margin annual recurring revenue. So it's quite meaningful to our bottom line. But most importantly for our customers, it's the second half of the GoPro experience. The camera is is one thing, but then helping people get the most out of that camera and the content they capture, that's what the subscription provides.
So what do they get for their money?
Well, if you're a GoPro subscriber, your GoPro will automatically upload all of your content to the cloud while it's charging. And then we'll send you a highlight video of all the footage that you've shot, guaranteed camera replacement if you ever damage your GoPro, discounts on mounts and accessories. So the GoPro subscription is very high value, and it's really the completion of the GoPro experience for our customers.
That's fascinating. I mean, it sounds like, from my director, it sounds like he's thinking of taking one out. He's just
He's probably already a subscriber.
Probably is. Where's consumer demand holding up best for you right now?
Excuse me?
Where's consumer demand holding up best right now?
At retail. We're going through a bit of a business shift. During COVID, at the outset of COVID, we really shifted our business focus towards direct sales at GoPro.com, which was a fantastic move for us at the time. We weathered COVID very well. We ran the business very profitably. But then as we came out of COVID, we quickly saw that consumers were returning to retail and primarily doing their shopping at retail. And we had pulled back a lot from retail during COVID because obviously consumers couldn't go to stores and whatnot. So 2 quarters ago, we shifted our strategy back to being more retail-centric. We're growing into thousands of new stores globally, expanding our marketing, expanding our product line. So it's an exciting growth period at GoPro.
Very good. And you're on a world tour right now.
On a world tour to promote the new products. It's exciting. It's fun to be back out.
Good to see you, Nick. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you very much.
That's it from me for the moment. I'm back tomorrow morning at 11:30. There's no afternoon show today because I've got an urgent appointment in South London to get to. Next up, it's Kamali Melbourne with coverage, of course, of Prime Minister's questions. Do stay tuned for that, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks very much for joining me today. Cheerio.